Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. I'm George Edelman, Director and Head of Partnerships at FT Strategies. For those who don't know us, we're the specialist media consultancy from the Financial Times, and I've had the privilege of leading our research on the Local News Playbook alongside our partners at the Knight Foundation. I'm delighted to be joined today by two fantastic leaders in local news who not only contributed to the research, but are actively shaping this space. Anjali Shah is CEO and Editor-in-Chief of Charlottesville Tomorrow, a newsroom that is deeply embedded in its community and has been very intentional about how it builds relationships, trust, and long-term value. And Cheryl Phillips is the founder of Big Local News at Stanford University and has been at the forefront of thinking about data, collaboration, and infrastructure in local journalism, particularly how we strengthen the ecosystem beyond individual organizations. We'd really encourage you to share your questions as we go. You can submit them via the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll pick up as many as we can towards the end. But before we get into questions, I wanted to quickly run through some of the key findings from the Local News Playbook. What we set out to achieve through this research was fairly simple, but quite ambitious at the same time, to move beyond individual case studies and really understand what's driving sustainability across the system as a whole. And we've all heard the story of some of the challenges that the local news industry is facing around the world, but particularly in the US. We've heard about the emergence of local news deserts. We've heard about the drops in coverage and journalists, as well as the closure of newspapers. And whilst there's been a lot of fantastic research on this, we didn't feel we needed to add to it. We wanted to be future-looking and solutions-focused and think about what are the key ingredients for sustainability. Our research, therefore, focused on three main areas. The first, really looking at the ecosystem as a whole. And we believe that local news organizations don't operate in a vacuum. And it's really important, therefore, to understand the different actors that contribute towards local news sustainability and what are the flows of values between them and how can we intervene to better support sustainability within the system. The second area we really wanted to focus on is looking across more sustainable news organizations. What are the common ingredients for success, or what we call the value drivers for sustainability? And then finally, we understand that there's not one size fits all for sustainability within news. So we wanted to offer varying archetypes of success so that local news organizations within the ecosystem can look and model their sustainability on those key characteristics. So firstly, when we talk about the local news ecosystem, it's unfair to think just about local news outlets themselves. And there are many players within that ecosystem, whether it be funders, whether it be practitioners like ourselves, educational institutions, and many more. And what we really wanted to show in here is that sustainability is about creating value, and those flows between the community and local news organizations, as well as the flows of capital between advertisers, philanthropists, between the audience itself, really need to be captured. And also the capabilities that underpin sustainability, whether they are softer capabilities like skills or harder capabilities like technology infrastructure, really need to be captured in one place so we have a common language or lingua franca in which to have these conversations around how we can support the ecosystem. And with the black dots in the diagram to the left really show where we saw opportunities for intervention within the ecosystem, whether it's regulation and deregulation, whether it's collaboration between capability builders and educational institutions, whether it's in the focus of funding and philanthropy, or whether it's in sustainable practices themselves. And what we wanted to do is we knew that we wouldn't capture this ecosystem perfectly, but what we wanted to do is create a map, a systems map, to have a common conversation and open up to the players within this ecosystem to contribute their piece. Then also, in terms of the local news organizations themselves, we wanted to dive in to really think about the key components of sustainability that they have control of. So this is where the diagram on the left, the local news value loop, comes into play. And the red boxes in the middle are really central to that. whether it's around the content and services that local news organizations provide to their community and how that is repaid in time, whether that's participation or attention. Then obviously the audience engagement itself, which drives proof of impact for funders as well as return on investment for advertisers themselves. Then obviously, crucially, the ability to monetize that, whether that's directly through audience revenue or through other means. And then underpinning that, the strategy, operations, and the tech infrastructure that enables the content and service creation. And I stress services in the case of this because I think it's really important that we think beyond just content about how, as local news organizations, we can provide services that meet community needs. In terms of then really defining what the key value drivers were across more sustainable news organizations, we saw 5 key ingredients that were common to all of the more sustainable news publishers we spoke to. The first is really having strong community connection. And we see time and time again, those more sustainable news organizations are deeply embedded in their communities. And there's a strong trust and identity with their broader community. Coupled with that, they also commonly have direct relationships, by which I mean channels where they can be a two-way relationship with audiences and interactivity. A common one, and we hear it time and time again, is around newsletters, but also other forums for direct communication. And we know that with some of the challenges of around search and AI, that also these channels in many ways mitigate the risk of disintermediation. Then in terms of revenue balance, it probably comes as a little surprise, but the more sustainable local news organizations that we see are the ones that are also diversified, but it's diverse point. So typically those organizations have 3 to 4 sustainable revenue streams, and also those additional revenue streams tend to be ancillary ones, so building on the strength of their core audience-centric revenue. Then we also found that more sustainable local news organizations have a really clear mission alignment. They tend to plan further in advance, and they really invest in their people in terms of editorial talent, but also the technology and skills that underpin that. And then finally, in terms of the more sustainable news organizations that we spoke to in this research, as part of the broader survey, we saw again and again that they're using innovation very intelligently, using data and AI to unlock broader opportunities, particularly around personalization, scale, and workflow efficiency. So if I was trying to summarize what is a 100-page report in just a few points, I think these takeaways really hold true. So firstly, we were trying to show that local news is not in isolation. Its sustainability depends on the whole ecosystem thriving. We see it time and time again that revenue follows on from having a deep connection with the community. So focusing on community first is a surefire way to build a sustainable local news business. And it's not always about scale and growth at all costs. Success can be as much around finding the right model for you and your market. And that can be based on funding as a catalyst, but funding should never be a crutch. And this is something that we see time and time again, where it's most effective to build sustainability. And we encourage any funders to really think about how they can use funding for a catalytic effect rather than purely ongoing support. And then finally, in that age of AI, being super relevant for your audience, building that trust and building that direct connection is the most significant way to mitigate some of those risks of technological disruption. So now what I'd like to do over the next 30 to 40 minutes is bring some of the ideas from the playbook to life through Cheryl and Anjali's experience and perspectives. So, Anjali and Cheryl, you were both interviewed for the research. What really resonated with you in the playbook and what felt missing or incomplete? Maybe Anjali, you can start.
Sure. I think I really appreciated, in particular, the long-term nature of what we're trying to do. I think in tech industries, in anything that is part of a digital economy, people understand that you need a substantial amount of capital over time to remake a marketplace or to remake a model for doing something. And I think our time scale for rebuilding business models and governance models in local news has been quite short, actually, in terms of the support we get at the local level. So, I think there's a lot, we talked about mapping, you talked about mapping the ecosystem, George. When you look at a map, so I was in New Zealand recently, not to brag, it's awesome, New Zealand's a beautiful place. But when you look at a map in New Zealand, right, the focus of that map is different and the map looks different. You have to reorient yourself. If you are from a place like the United States that used to a standard version of a map that we see, that puts sort of US in the middle of things. So from my perspective, when I think about mapping the ecosystem, right, you have a piece there for community. For me, that piece is 3/4 of the screen. And so even when we talk about operations, governance, scaled services, it's from the lens of that community. So for us, I think, and again, I can only speak from my experience in a smaller market, in a rural market here in Central Virginia, but for us, that those services come as much locally as possible, our financial services, even our insurers, as much of this being local as possible is actually a huge part of our value proposition to the community, which is that we are not outsourcing things outside the community. We are continuing to help build wealth, build knowledge, build skills, and build ownership of our nonprofit news organizations. So, when I think about how we would lay out the findings of this report, actually, I agree with a lot of them from my perspective. And also I would lay it out differently to make the emphasis more on community strength for all parts of our news organizations.
I love that. And I think that focus on community value is something that is essential for any successful news organization. And I wanted to ask you, Cheryl, that the report puts a big emphasis on that community value as the starting point before revenue, before product. Why do you feel, or indeed not, that this is the right framing for local news right now?
Well, I think that's the edge that local news has, right? I mean, our trust, our involvement with community, that's what makes the difference. I can go to a big, large global news organization and find what's happening at a very big scale, but I'm not going to be able to find out what happened with my local city council or nonprofit, or what the new building is that's going up down the block in a reliable way. And the community news organization can fill that need and do it in real time and do it kind of in conversation with the community. That just doesn't exist elsewhere. And so that's where we need to be filling that gap. The other thing that I think really stuck out to me out of this report is just this recognition that we are not operating in a silo. We cannot operate in a silo. We are not each our own island. We need to figure out how we can leverage kind of infrastructure and build pipelines so that we're not all reinventing the wheel every time. We need to be able to do that so that we can lower the cost of the reporting that we do.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And just going back to that community value piece for a second, Anjali, it can obviously mean different things to different people, whether that's utility, connection, accountability. In your work specifically, what does that actually look like day to day?
Well, it looks like our team sees somebody at the grocery store and talks to them about what we do. I mean, we're a smaller community, and that means that we're very close to the folks that we serve. And I will say that sits a little bit in tension with this conversation about efficiencies, because in truth, our community is not looking for efficiencies. They're looking for connection. They're looking for investment in their lives. They're not looking for us to have fewer employees because we're using AI. They want us to hire. They want us to work with local vendors and our local community. We have a beautiful nonprofit community here in Central Virginia, and so a lot of our infrastructure actually comes from that local ecosystem, and that's really, really important for us, while we're still obviously investing in our colleagues who are working in the news industry around the country. We spend a lot of time on that as well because we want to help. I think day to day for us, with our national foundation colleagues and service providers, they're asking how many stories, how many page views, how many users, how many. And our local community is asking how have you done this? Who have you included? Who was part of the planning process? How did you choose which stories to cover and which not to? Right. So it's quite a tension that we live in because we see ourselves as a community service organization. Many of the national conversations and funders are around the scale of a digital or a digital service organization.
And Cheryl, looking across the United States, what do you see as actually stopping local news organizations from fully unlocking their value today?
I think I see a couple of things. One is I see that some news organizations are building technical solutions kind of independently as opposed to collaboratively, and I think we need to move beyond that. We need to, whether it's with collaborating in your local community with another nonprofit or collaborating across the news ecosystem, we need to figure out how not to keep building the same thing over and over again, but build something that can be shared to help level up what we're trying to do. The other thing that I think I would say is that the best collaborations give the agency to the local news organization. So that, for example, we at Big Local News, we sometimes will share data out that can drive local stories. But the goal should not be us telling the local news organization, here's your story, but rather here is the information and how you can access it so that you can figure out where your story is and what your story is and how you want to engage with that. But that's where the control and the driving force needs to be.
That's really, really interesting. And I do think, it opens up a lot of questions. And it makes me think also of that, how sustainability is driven through the value loop that I talked about earlier. We see, again, through our research, that relevance drives attention, and attention then drives revenue, which ultimately kind of builds that capacity and the virtuous cycle. But where do you, Anjali, see that loop breaking most often in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's the attention piece. I think Vana Muruga-san, if anybody was at the Night Media Forum in Miami, he said it beautifully on stage, very boldly, because he's working out of Minnesota at Sahan Journal, which is getting a lot of attention. Attention is not commitment. Attention is not commitment. And I'm quoting him directly. I don't want to take credit for that. And we feel that very acutely in the local setting. Attention, virality, traffic, getting put up on a pedestal in the industry is not the same as commitment to our community and investment in our community. So it is that intention piece of the value loop that I think breaks down. And again, it gets back to that central tension that there is a conversation about scale and efficiency that drives a lot of the large industry conversations, when what actually helps for our communities is commitment and relationship. So, we're always trying to reconcile that. Scale and attention are tools to get to our larger goal, which is that community building piece that local news has the ability to provide.
That's super interesting. When you spin things around, it really changes how you may define success in local news. So by that nature, is there a different way to measure it too? And I wonder, Cheryl, when you think about pre-existing metrics that we typically use to measure success within the news industry, I wonder if there's another metric you currently see that reflects real value, and one metric that we've used previously that really doesn't.
Well, I mean, I'll dispatch with the one that we used previously that really doesn't, and that is clearly clicks. I mean, like that world is gone. It is completely gone, and we shouldn't be trying to chase that. What we should be trying to chase is and case is probably not even the right word, engage with is the community, is like whether it's events, whether it's conversation, whether it's local impact and change. That's where we need to be spending our time and resources. And I'll say that that one component piece of that is that this world where a news organization publishes one story and then is done with that piece of information is also gone. We need to think about how we are reimagining how we deliver information to our readers, users, listeners. And it can come in a lot of different forms. And so making sure that that's where we're spending our time and attention, I think it will not only help with the engagement, but will also help build revenue sustainability.
And perhaps also from your side, Anjali, I'd love to hear your understanding, particularly maybe in the context of the relationship side.
There are so many distractions when you are a digital first newsroom, right? Like there are ways that even on our team and our reporters and editors, they could get really distracted by threads on Blue Sky, Reddit threads, Google Analytics. Our main metric of success for our organization, and this goes from our board through to every person on our team, through to our partnerships, through to our community, is do the communities that we serve have better civic health? Do they have more power in their civic lives because they engage with us? And that's maybe influenced, like the traffic and all the sort of general metrics of the digital economy might be tools to get there, but it's not the same thing. And I'll give you an example. We have a housing resource guide on our website. It's an amazing digital feature because we have a lot of housing resources in Central Virginia, but they're hard to navigate. We also have a lot of people in housing crisis at the same time. So in our reporting on housing, it became very clear we were getting so many people messaging our reporters and our editors. One reporter, I should shout her out, Erin O'Hare, she's brilliant. She got so many messages from people like, where do I get help? I'm on the verge of losing my apartment. I can't pay my property taxes. My roof is leaking, but there's nothing I can do about it because I can't afford the higher cost of materials and labor. So finally, we really dug in and invested in making a guide that pulled together these resources that people can use online, but all these agencies, frankly, and organizations that were helping people didn't know about. They didn't know there was another group out there or another government program or another something that they could provide their clients and the communities they serve. So that guide is powerful. It is one of the most impactful things we do, and it is not nearly the best traffic thing. Why? Because it's keeping something on the order of hundreds of people out of housing crisis. Does that serve scale? No. Does our community value that and want that? Yes, 100% they do. They absolutely do.
I think it's a fantastic point, and I love your emphasis on empowerment of your community. Going beyond even service, which I spoke about at the top, and then also the idea of this kind of deep relationship based on trust and needs being addressed. And
George, I would also shout out, if we are looking for models, I think the Listening Post Collective, which is an organization out of Internews, their civic playbooks and the way that they think about whether or not information ecosystems are serving communities, I think is a really brilliant model to really dig into.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a real opportunity in the digital space to have that interactivity with your audience and really differentiate in some ways from traditional print media, for instance. And
Outlier Media is another good example of that, where they're really serving the needs of the community and trying to provide resources that help. And then that can fuel and support stories, accountability stories built on top of that.
So I guess on the flip side of that, I'd be really interested where you both think there are missed opportunities right now when it comes to real dialogue with communities. Maybe Anjali, you can start.
One thing that we know people value about our organization, we do a lot of community listening, we do survey, we're doing assessment. It's a really core part of what we do, and we invest in that. So it's not just about churning out stories, but it's understanding what happens, what people do with it, and understanding where we need to put resources. One thing that I think has been very, very important for our community that they want from us is to know each other. If you know anything about the South of the United States, you know that, and this is true for a lot of this country, there are many communities that are very separated from each other due to history, due to economics, due to socioeconomics, due to a giant wealth gap we have here of people who have a lot and people who have very little. So what people continually ask us for is to close that gap, to help bring these communities that aren't in contact with each other back in contact with each other, so that we understand how everybody in our community lives as we make decisions about our neighborhoods and our economies together. So we, invest a lot in that, making sure that our stories represent the people most impacted, making sure that our services are designed for people very impacted, and people who have a lot who might not benefit from the Housing Resource Guide can understand who that's impacted, because they read the story where there's actually a person that they now know the name of when they walk by them on the street. So that's very, very important for us. And we just hired Sabrina Feggins, who's probably listening. Sabrina, shout out to you, who is really helping supercharge our in-person strategy as well. We just had like 100 people in the newsroom. It's like an open house with the Chamber of Commerce here. And that kind of thing is really, really important to make sure people understand that this is their newsroom and it's a third space for them to connect with each other.
And I guess, Cheryl, from your side, maybe the flip side of that, where have you seen meaningful interaction with audiences work really well? And I guess also, where does it fall down in your view?
I had my students do a story a few years ago where we looked at police use of force in Bakersfield, California, and we found that often when a police officer used force, they might use a baton, they broke a bone. And so this was in Bakersfield, California, and we followed up that reporting with community engagement, where we worked with local community members to kind of get response both to the stories that we did, but to kind of dig in more deeply about what is really going on in this community. With news organizations who publish these stories. And as a result, we found a whole nother story about how police officers dealt with folks who had mental illness. That would not have happened had we not reached out and really engaged the community members. And so I think kind of to Anjali's point, the more we engage with the community and ask them, what are we missing, the better we will be. The thing where I think we miss sometimes can because news organizations, especially local news organizations, are financially strapped, where we miss that where we have a gap is taking that information that we're getting from the local community members and translating that into what's the next piece of coverage that we can do, or how could we leverage a data set that would help us analyze a pattern that's happening and really report that out. And we sometimes can't make that leap, that connection, just simply because of figuring out taking that step back of does this align with where we need to be going with our coverage? And I think that's something that I've seen both just in partnership with local news organizations.
Fantastic. And I'm always reluctant to switch the focus away from audience because it's such an important part of what we do. But I'm going to look a little bit now at the product data and AI side. And the report itself is pretty clear that not investing in product is a long-term mistake. Cheryl, maybe good to get your views on what you see as smart product investment. What does it actually look like for a local newsroom? And then, Anjali, love to get your opinion too.
We do a lot at Big Local News of trying to build not just static snapshots of data that somebody can build a one-off story out of, but streams of information, and how to use the streams of information to find out what's happening in your community and report that out effectively. And I think that the more a local news organization does the same, then the better they will be able to serve the information needs of their community. So everything from local government agendas and minutes to layoff notices to things like that if we can reduce the amount of time on these already strapped local news organizations to be able to find the relevant information and then let the resources go toward building out what they're providing to the community, whether it is a quick news alert, or it's a more in-depth, story about a pattern or that has been spotted in that data stream. And I think that's where we'll see that building a product makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. And Anjali, what does it mean for you and Phil tomorrow?
We invested in starting to build up a product team when we were 5 people. So that was actually one of the first things that we said that we really, really needed. We needed, and we want that team to be bigger and more well-resourced. We're working on it. But we knew that the way that we design product is not just a question of efficiencies. It's not a question of whether our reporters are amazing. They can figure things out and use technology really well. It was a question of, are we designing for the communities we're hoping to serve, actually? Which sometimes I think some of the out-of-the-box sort of things that are funded, we're in a nonprofit, so in that nonprofit ecosystem that get funded aren't actually designed for a rural community or a community that maybe has varying literacy rates, for example, or a community that is accessing news. We have some places in our service area that doesn't have great internet access. We have a broadband problem in this country that's quite mirroring our local news problem. So we think about that a lot on our product side. I want to quote another amazing, brilliant colleague now, Sarad Davenport at Vinegar Hill Magazine, which is a local magazine here. Look it up, they're very amazing. He always says, when we collaborate, it has to be a relationship, equity, and then collaboration. And I think often the larger or more well-funded organizations that we collaborate with who have sort of a national purview start with the collaborative piece without knowing what is the equity piece, right? We bring a lot to the table in those collaborations, but it kind of takes a minute to get to the point, well, what is our value that we've added and how can we bring that back to our community? So I think, for us, product and AI is really, really important, and also people severely underestimate what we're capable of doing in our communities here.
And I can't believe we've got 35 minutes in and only just said the AI words. I'm just really interested in terms of Charlottesville tomorrow, like how you're actually using AI today and where you see the real opportunity.
Yeah. Listen, we're working on it like everybody. We're constantly reevaluating our policies and our ethics. I would be remiss to, it would be very wrong of me to talk about how we use AI before saying Virginia is the data center capital of this country at the moment. And the economic infrastructure and environmental and climate implications of that for us here locally are huge. And we have to talk about that. We have to talk about it. Because again, our organization, it's not entirely about efficiency. It's about how are we impacting our communities. So before I say anything about what we're doing with AI, I want to say that our team is always thinking through that problem. There are some things we cannot solve. Our parking structure across the street now uses AI facial recognition to charge us. And can I solve that problem running a newsroom? No, I cannot, because our people need to park, right? But we have to grapple with that, especially when you're in communities that are the ones that are marginalized and generally going to be in the line of the new coal-fired power plant or the wire, the giant electrical infrastructure that we need if we are going to continue down this road of massive use of AI. So that's my disclaimer. That said, we are finding smart ways to use AI, particularly in operations and management, in some of our advancement work, our revenue building work. We're very transparent about our use of AI, and we're still building those policies out. On the reporting side, we are working through it, but I will say the smaller the community, the less likely you have rigorous data to work with or rigorous source material to work with. And that material comes in all different forms. So we're still playing with it, but the sort of hallucinations and the errors that come with a lot of the scraping of AI is definitely a challenge and sometimes take more time for us at our scale than just looking through documents. When we have big data sets, though, we absolutely try to figure out the points where we can check, how useful these tools actually are. Or
Yes,
whether
and
they're blinding us to something we might see with our own eyes that the AI decides is unimportant.
I totally agree. And Cheryl, Anjali talks there about how AI has become more embedded in operations and particularly workflows. And I'd love to know from you how you think local news organizations can maintain editorial trust and judgment, especially in smaller teams without formal governance.
Yeah, I
I would
mean,
say we need formal governance. We have to have governance. So I would just put that caveat on it too.
no, I mean, I agree that the governance is critical. For me, for example, the AI tools that we've built out in support of local news organizations are built with this ethos of transparency so that I can fact check in real time, so that I know that what I'm getting is something that I can verify, both for the journalist who might be using the AI tool and for the general public who might be getting access to some piece of that tool. So in California, we partnered with 4 major news organizations for to publish this police records access project, the searchable database of police use of force and misconduct. We could not have done that work without AI. It would have been impossible to parse through all of these PDFs and pull out the names of officers who used force without using a large language model. So we did entity extraction using AI. But when you do a search on these websites, on the news organization's websites for a particular officer, it points you straight to the document. You can then go look at the document and verify that it is who you think it is. So like being able to have that transparency built in is really important. We've built another tool called Data Talk with Monica Lama, a computer science professor here at Stanford, that allows you to do campaign finance, queries on who's giving money to what race and what have you. And that's the same idea. It responds back with the answer. You ask the question in just plain English, it gives you the answer back, but it provides simplified explanation of the code, a technical explanation of the code, and points you to a link where you can write your own code and look at the exact FEC table to make sure that you understand that that you can again fact check in real time. So I think the more we build in kind of those transparencies, so that trust is front and center, I think that's what we need to do. And the more we can build tools like this that can be used and modified, customized by a local news organization for a local news organization, the more success we'll see and more sustainability we can build in.
Yeah, and before we move on from AI, Cheryl, I'm just interested if you can summarize succinctly whether you think AI is a net opportunity for local news, or in terms of maybe new revenue or efficiency, or the risks outweigh it in terms of value extraction.
I think that we're at a critical point, right? I think the risks are real, and we run the real concern is that for me, that local news organizations don't have the leverage that they need to be able to make sure that they hold the control and the power, and then we need to make sure that we figure out a way so that they're like, Anjali is in charge of the information that Charlottesville Tomorrow produces, and is sitting on real value there with all of the information that her reporters collect, process, synthesize, add their critical thinking skills to every single day. That's very valuable information, and just giving it out to the community without recognizing the value of it. You want to make sure the community can have access to it, but the underlying corpus, that stream of information, there are ways to leverage that, and we don't want to just give that away. So that's the tension, I think.
Definitely. And from your perspective,
the analogy I would give is like we're a mom and pop store sitting next to Amazon, right? Like 20 years ago. The amount of capital being invested right now is not something, even if our product is amazing and valuable to people, the amount of capital flowing through the tech sector at the moment is like, I have to wonder, how do we make sure that we have a fair shake at the value that our product creates? Because I mentioned before, we need computer scientists, technologists, statisticians. We need those folks in our newsroom as we continue to do our work. And also, how do we compete with $100 billion of investment? How do we compete with the universities that have corporate tie-ins? How do we compete with frankly, even in the nonprofit sector, the larger foundations and organizations that have so much more access to capital than we do to build up, again, these very new types of products? So we're in it, right? And we're in a death spiral. If you look at what happened with Amazon, right? What does it mean? Those mom and pop stores closed. And now that Amazon has a giant share of the market, people are missing the value of those operations. And I really, really hope that that does not happen here, and that organizations like mine and my community get to take part in the governance and the deliberation and the negotiation with the companies that draw value from our work, draw value from our community, really.
I mean, in a perfect world, I feel like a collaborative ecosystem that allows the small news organizations to deposit and collect information that helps them serve their communities, could both help with news and help with revenue sustainability. But what this means is that idea of radical collaboration, which Maria Ressa talked about at GIJN. You know, that's where we need to go. And if we don't go there, I think we'll be in really dangerous waters.
We need equity in our systems. We need equity on all sides, not just equity in what our philanthropists or what the ecosystem wants for our market, but what our community wants. So I think, you know, it's about regulation. It's about also saying that the big players shouldn't be in a vacuum negotiating, because generally that doesn't turn out that well for us, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and you both touched upon so many what I'd call possibilities for intervention within the ecosystem to improve sustainability throughout, particularly things like funding and capacity and collaboration and the talent pipeline. I'd love to just dig into that a little bit. You know, as we discussed, the report says funding should be catalytic, not a crutch. And in practice, what do you see, Cheryl, as good funding actually looks like from your perspective?
Yeah, well, for me, I think making sure that we're not funding in silos. That, here is funding, go build this product for year one newsroom, and then that's it. Well, when the same product that newsroom is building could be actually adopted and perhaps, customized a little bit, but adopted by other news organizations. And so making sure that we're building in a collaborative way, in a way that allows for kind of an infrastructure capacity building way, so that it's not just a one-off. The more we build systems that allow people to build on top of those specific things for their communities, the better off we will be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Angela, you mentioned earlier about the flows of capital through the ecosystem. There's been quite considerable capital go into local news, but where do you think it's still falling short?
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there considerable capital going into local news? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Honestly, I appreciate how many people are working so hard to increase the dollars. Our country at large, I don't know, is there yet. And I hope we get there, because it's a considerable challenge. The local news, the rural news ecosystem, it's a big challenge for this country. And that challenge is not just about news. That challenge is about how our communities and our democracy function. So I hope that we're able to build enough momentum to meet that moment with a little bit more gusto than where we are now. I think it's falling, again, just to come back to that question of the long-term nature, of the problem. Like I said before, we need amazing people in our organizations. The capital investment you need for that, to build new revenue models, to build new products, to build new ways of reaching people through the murk of AI slop and, TikTok and Snapchat's come back. One of our college students here told me this. Snapchat's back. So, we need longer commitments so that we have the ability to bring those people in, right? Who can we hire if we're on soft money for 2 years? Who can we hire in that situation, to build something new? So I think, that's always my plea for folks: make long commitments to places that are going to do that work, to build products and work collaboratively with our colleagues, to build things that are appropriate for our communities that we're serving.
I'm really keen to kind of open up to the audience a little bit more now, because we could go on talking for hours in terms of the questions I have for you. And so I want to I have them up in front of me. I have a few questions I want to rattle through with you. If you could keep your answers succinct, we may be able to get through a bit more, as many as possible, because there are a lot here. And the first one I wanted to kick off with is, first starts with a bit of a statement that it sounds like a larger corporate publishers will struggle to capture the key ingredients from the playbook because they operate across multiple local areas. So it's a broad question, but do you see this as the end of publishing local news at scale from both of your perspectives?
I don't at all think that it's the end of publishing local news at scale. I think that if handled right, it could be an increase in actually more effectively, and by effective I don't mean like better covering local news, so that it's not a top-down proposition, but that it's empowering the local reporters, the local editors who know their community to find out what's happening at that very local level, or mine and analyze the streams of information to say, oh, here is what's happening in this location that has been completely missed. And so we can now put our resources there. I think if anything, it will leverage the ability to coverage local news.
And I've got a question here for you specifically, Anjali, and maybe you can touch on the last one in answering it. But the audience member thought it was a great point you made on people asking for how many, in terms of the community simply asking how, so the impact. What are some of the ways you and your team demonstrate how you've done this to your community, the impact to your community?
Yeah. So some people on this call might know we have this commitment to tracking impact, and it is a qualitative tracking that we have done for years. And we're building out sort of our analysis of that qualitative tracking of impact so that it becomes the primary metric for us. Some newsrooms are obsessed with Google Analytics. Our newsroom is obsessed with our impact dashboard. Which parts of our work are people using? Which parts of our work is affecting people's lives? Because ultimately, that's what they want from us. They want a product that is going to help them live better locally. So we're really, really obsessed with that, and we're building that out. These are metrics that are meaningful for us, that's meaningful for our board. We have a community-based board. I haven't talked about governance enough, but that governance piece is really, really important for us, that we do have community members who govern our organization from different parts of our community, who know different parts of our community well, who are leaders. So yeah, that's our primary metric, actually. We track many other things. We track all the things that many newsrooms track, but also the question is it in service to that impact goal that we have, our mission of helping our communities be stronger through information?
No, I'm totally with you. And I have another excellent question here for the both of you around whether you think that local news organizations are at risk of creating value that others, especially AI platforms, end up capturing. And if so, what can realistically be done about it? Cheryl, do you want to have first
they're contemplating that. I think that's a good world to be in if we're creating value that other corporations see. Oh wait, there's something real happening here in this world, because then maybe that we can use that to leverage our negotiations, right? Make sure that understanding that what we have is valuable, that building a collaborative system across many local news organizations could actually enhance our ability to negotiate. And thinking about how we do that, I think, is vital. So,
yes, yes. The answer is yes. It absolutely is a danger. But I will say it's not a new danger for us. Look, I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia. Some of you might be familiar with our small town for various reasons. Charlottesville, Virginia has had people profiting off of other people's work and labor for hundreds of years. This is not a new problem for the communities that we serve. And in fact, there are people in our community that have been working. This is, I mean, to me, it's a civil rights issue, right? That they've been working through this problem for generations and being so strong about it. So if our newsroom can contribute to bringing that economy back to the people who are doing the work, who are here on the ground doing the work, I'm really honored to be at the helm of that organization.
And we haven't really touched upon it in this discussion, but there are obviously other non-traditional creators of news creators, content creators, who have built audiences over time. You know, how do you see them fitting into this ecosystem? We'd love to get both of you.
It's so important. If you look at, local news maps, Charlottesville itself is not considered a news desert. But I will say Virginia's 40% people of color, and people of color have not been served very well for a long time. So, and the rural counties around us are absolutely news deserts. So there's things at the macro level that you can't see until you come here. Come visit. Our newsroom's really fun. I think I'm sorry, can you repeat? So I'm like losing the thread here.
No, it was around the news creator
side.
Yeah, the news creator side.
Right. So, what I wanted to say is that we have this amazing community of community leaders, people who have become the information nodes for their community. And for us, it's not about bolstering or rethinking local news. It's about letting those folks who have been filling these gaps for a long time lead and take us where they want us to go. Because it wasn't news organizations in the pandemic that allowed Spanish speakers in our area to become highly vaccinated. That was community leaders who had built up newsletters and SMS services and church bulletin boards and all kinds of things. And we have to give them power about how we build up our ecosystem with strength.
I totally agree. I'd love to ask you both a couple of quick fire questions from the audience. One thing that local news outlets, funders, or capacity builders need to stop doing, and one thing they need to double down on. Cheryl first.
They need to stop building in isolation. Stop thinking that their community solution is totally unique. Find the commonalities and build there, and then develop the uniqueness on top of that.
And Anjali?
Well, I'm going to start with a positive. I think double down on these models where you're looking deeply at the governance of organizations and who is being served by them from the community's perspective, right? Not how many newsrooms are there, what do community members want for themselves? So double down on that. Stop offering short-term money. Make a time commitment. Make a longer commitment as much as you can. We have a lot of donors who give what they can, and I appreciate that very much. For foundations, for people making investments, give us some time.
I couldn't agree more. And before we close, I'd love to take a moment to spotlight the brilliant work both of you are doing in practice. Anjali, could you briefly share what Charlottesville Tomorrow is focused on right now and explain how folks can support and get involved?
Yeah. So if you're interested on the local impact of sort of increasing energy needs, you can see quite a few stories on our homepage at cvilletomorrow.org right now about that. You can also see really amazing reports on reentry, mental health, education, and our voter guide. Please check out our voter guide. We're really proud of it. And I would say, if you're interested in our model, subscribe. Tell me what you think. You'll get an email where you can make an appointment with me, and we can literally talk for 30 minutes if you are a subscriber. And if you can, donate, because we do a lot of this work similar to what FT Strategies does. We do a lot of work with our ecosystem, but we're not necessarily compensated for that beyond the amazing exchanges that we have that are so crucial to working together.
Thank you so much. And Cheryl, could you tell us a little bit more about what Big Local News is working on at the moment and how others in the ecosystem can engage or collaborate?
Sure. Right now, I mean, we have our data sharing platform and collaborative where we continue to try to support collection and dissemination of data for story discovery. But one of our big efforts right now is Agenda Watch, where we're scraping local government agendas in minutes at scale. And we have a search platform that we're adding a couple hundred agencies every single week. And the idea is that you can monitor what's happening in your local community at that local city council, county commission level, and look for patterns, look for things that your community members are going to these meetings and raising concerns, and really make it just do a better job of covering what's happening at that local community level.
Thank you both for your fascinating insights. I mean, if there's one thread running through all of it, it's that sustainability doesn't start with revenue or technology or even scale. It starts with community value. And I think that the organizations that are figuring this out aren't waiting for perfect conditions. They're building that value, strengthening those relationships, and then aligning everything else around it. So I just wanted to take the time to thank all of you for joining this conversation, and I look forward to continue the discussion from here. Thank you.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
So much.